Відчуваєш неспокій? Квайт заспокоює, і на душі стає легше.
Is not just fighting for Ukraine. This is such a David and Goliath story. There's no other option, is that Ukraine wins.
Про Україну з захопленням говорить весь світ. Ми продовжуємо міжнародний проєкт Joint Efforts Canada&Ukraine спільними зусиллями до перемоги. І сьогодні в мене по-особливому смілива гостя, яку я з впевненістю можу ідентифікувати як українку. І зовсім згодом зрозумієте, про що я. Хезер МакФірсен. Канадський політик, депутат від Нової Демократичної партії. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Перше моє питання буде стосовно дати 24 лютого 2022 рік. Ви особисто в себе в пості написали наступний допис, який я, власне, хочу процитувати. Поки ми з жахом дивимося на напад на Україну, Володимир Путін продовжить ескалацію. Він прагне відтворити версію Російської імперії та боїться демократії. Він продовжить порушувати демократію в Європі та за її межами. Власне, так і сталося. Ваші слова були пророчими. Яким для вас був цей день?
It was just devastating. I mean, what a horrible thing. You know, the global community had hoped that there was some truth in what Vladimir Putin was saying to us, that he had said he would not invade Ukraine. We had hoped that he was not going to further invade. We had hoped that there would be some sense there, that there would be some recognition of international law, there would be some recognition of human rights, and I think that day was, for all of us, for all parliamentarians, for people in Canada across the country, it was this day where the hope was gone. The hope that Ukraine would be able to avoid the bloodshed, the horror, that hope was gone. And we knew then that we were in a war.
Вже ввечері канадці активно підтримували Україну, виходили на мітинги разом з українцями, які на той час мешкали в Канаді, з гаслом «Stand with Ukraine». Якою була ваша особиста позиція?
Yeah, you know, I've been to Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine a few times, and of course I'm from the prairies in Canada, where we have an enormous Ukrainian population. Many of my friends and family are of Ukrainian descent, and so for me it was so important that I show my support for the Ukrainian people. One of the things that I'm most proud of with regards to our parliament, with regards to Canada, is all parties, every member of the House of Commons stands with Ukraine. This has never been something that we've fought over. This has never been something we've bickered over. Yes, of course, as an opposition member, I will push the government to do more, but all Canadians got behind this call to support Ukraine. And when you look at the different parties in the House of Commons, we don't agree on very much, but we do agree that we will stand and continue to fight for Ukraine. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of our parliament for that.
Чимало жінок наразі тримає оборону України на фронті. Хто для вас і як ви можете охарактеризувати українку?
I mean, the Ukrainian woman is many different faces, of course. It is the women who have come to Canada with their children to protect their children and to care for their children. It is the women in Ukraine who have stayed behind, who are fighting. You know, I see that face. You know, I was in Poland in March, and I met some of the women who were fleeing the violence in Ukraine that were with their children. Their face, for me, they looked... I'm a mother. I have children, yes. And I can't help seeing my face in those faces. I can't help seeing these children that have the same puffy jacket or the same sweatshirt on or whatever else that my children would have. It's very difficult for me to not see that as you know, this could have been my children. This could have been any woman's children. So for me, I see the women of Ukraine, and you know, very early on. You know that the world thought that Ukraine would not be able to hold out against this massive Russian army. And the heroes, the people who have held the line, who have pushed the Russian army back, who have continued to fight, who have continued to hold sovereign Ukraine, you can't think high enough of people who are doing this, who have fought this is such a David and Goliath story, and it isn't anymore. You know, we've made it is very, very clear that the Ukrainians that are fighting for all of us, that are not just fighting for Ukraine, but are fighting for democracy, for the rule of law, for human rights, for global sovereignty. I mean, those issues, these are what the Ukrainian women are fighting for right now, and it's awe-inspiring.
З самого початку повномасштабного вторгнення Володимир Зеленський, наш президент, неодноразово звертався до канадського уряду, і нам приємно, що парламентарі, власне, його зустрічають завжди стоячи і з підтримкою. Проте мене цікавить, як реагують на Україну в кулуарах і коридорах парламенту, хто її підтримує і чи є такі, які не підтримують.
I think, honestly, we were all in support of Ukraine. The division, I guess, I talked about this earlier. I mean, when President Zelensky spoke to our House of Commons, to our parliament, every member was so moved. I mean, he has shown himself to be the leader that Ukraine needed right now. Absolutely. The entire world is in awe. You know, we all, I remember in those early days, I would wake up every morning and make sure that he was still all right, that he was still healthy. So I think all of us stood behind. The division that you see within countries is, do we feel like our government is doing enough? What more could our government do? What more should we be doing? How much faster should we be moving on things? I think you see a lot of parliamentarians that want the government to do more and do it faster. It's that urgency. And if we are going to give supports to Ukraine, give them now. They need them now. So now is the issue. So I think you'll see opposition members pushing that, making sure, for me, one of the big issues is the sanctions, making sure that Russian oligarchs are sanctioned and that that's enforced, that they are not able to sort of slither away with their money, that they are held accountable, that they pay for what they're doing and how they're supporting Vladimir Putin. So pushing the government further is where we see the divisions, not necessarily on the support for Ukraine, because that's universal.
Рік війни позаду. Як ви оцінюєте допомогу канадського уряду Україні?
First of all, I'm so sorry that it's been a year. And my greatest hope is that we are not in this situation in another year, that Russia has been defeated and that they are out of Ukraine before we see another year go by. In terms of the Canadian response, I think Canada can do more. And I think it needs to do more. You know, we've had members of parliament that have come from Ukraine to speak to us as parliamentarians multiple times. I have to tell you, one of the members of parliament gave me a piece of shrapnel that had fired through her town, the town that her children live in. And I keep that on my desk in the House of Commons to remind me what we're fighting for. Canada needs to be a leader in working with our allies to make sure that the delivery of material happens fast, happens urgently. We need to be a leader in making sure that there is humanitarian support for Ukraine. We need to be already, in my mind, thinking about how the global community is going to support Ukraine to rebuild. It is going to be a very big job to rebuild the damage that Russia has inflicted upon Ukrainians. And so the global community needs to find a way to pay for that, to rebuild Ukraine so that Ukraine can continue to be the democracy that it is striving to be. You know, that these are things that we need to do more of. We also have expertise within Canada. We could be doing things like helping demine fields. Canada's known for demining. That's going to be key, particularly when we look at food security and how, grain is needed around the world. Ukrainian grain is needed all throughout the Middle East and North Africa. So I think there's a lot of ways Canada can support Ukraine. And my goal is that those things are determined and that they are delivered fast. They're done with the urgency we require. It's not helpful to Ukraine if these things trickle in. We need to have these things happen very, very urgently.
Ви особисто вірите, що Україна все-таки переможе?
There's no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind. There's no other option, is that Ukraine wins. And I also think it's important that everyone in the world recognizes that Ukraine will be victorious, but will also decide when they want to be part of discussions on peace building, when they want to be involved in discussions, when they want to be part of those discussions. I think that's up to Ukraine to decide, not anyone else.
Наступна дата надзвичайно важлива для українців. Це 27 квітня 2022 року. Палата громад Канади одноголосно ухвалила резолюцію про визнання російських військових дій в Україні геноцидом. Я хочу особисто вам подякувати, тому що дійсно рішення було прийнято. Чи було складно домогтися вам особисто такого результату?
First of all, that was a very moving day for me to be able to move that motion, to bring that motion forward. I had already moved a motion in the House of Commons after what we had heard coming out of Bucha. So I'd already moved a motion that had declared what was happening in Bucha as genocidal, as a hate crime. But to be able to actually have this motion agreed to by every single member of the Canadian House of Commons meant an awful lot. It was important. And I think what it does is it actually solidifies how important it is that Canada be involved. If we acknowledge that a genocide is happening against the Ukrainian people, and there is no doubt that that is the case, every single indicator within the Genocide Convention has been hit by Putin. He has done every single crime to the Ukrainian people. So for us to have that motion come forward meant the Parliament, that the Government of Canada has these marching orders from the parliamentarians, that every party, every member of our House saw that there is a genocide happening, and we have moral obligations to step in and do everything we can once that declaration is in place. Even this week, I was very happy because I was able to bring forward a motion to get the Wagner Group listed as a terrorist entity, which I think is also very, very important. We see what the Wagner Group is doing in Ukraine. We see how they are targeting civilians. We see the brutality and the barbarism that they are bringing forward, and I think it is just important that that be another motion that we bring forward, that we are declaring them as terrorists.
Thank you. Вас сміливо можна ідентифікувати як українку, слідкуючи за вашими соціальними мережами. Основне фото ваше – це український синьо-жовтий прапор. Чому?
Well, I represent a riding in the prairies in Edmonton-Stratkona, and I have to say that there is an enormous number of Ukrainian people that live in that area. So even before the war that's happening right now and the most current invasion by Russia, I was the vice chair of the Canada-Ukraine Friendship Association. I did a lot of my work on this, and just as my predecessor had done before me, because Edmonton, it's always a bit of a joke in Canada, but every single person in Edmonton is a little bit Ukrainian. There's just so many Ukrainians there, and it is such an important part of our culture. You can't go very far without Ukrainian food being served at our weddings, at our events. It's just part of being Canadian, part of being from the prairies.
Продовжуючи тему українського прапора, позаду мене знаходиться український стяг з особливими словами. І я знаю, що він для вас, також має особливе значення, він з Києва. Розкажіть про нього детально.
So this flag is very, very important. This flag was given to me. We had an intern, Maria, who came and worked in our office for the summer and spent some time with us, helping us with some of the work that we were doing to support Ukraine. And the first day she came, she gave us this flag. It was myself and some of my staff, some of my team were in the office, and she pulled this flag out and we all started to cry. This is a flag that's been signed by members of the Ukrainian military, the heroes of Ukraine that have signed this flag. So for me, it's probably one of the most cherished things that I have, and the fact that that this was a gift for me that I can keep is very precious. It's very precious for me.
Хорошою традицією українця є наш національний одяг. Мова йде про українську вишиванку. Скажіть, будь ласка, чи маєте ви особисто український національний одяг і чи святкуєте День української вишиванки тут в Канаді?
Of course I do. Yeah, in fact, I have a funny story I could tell you. So in Edmonton, in Alberta, there are lots of Ukrainian diaspora, members of the Ukrainian community. So it's very easy to get a vizhyanka. They're for sale everywhere. You can buy one anywhere. But for some of my members of the House of Commons that are from Quebec, from the French-speaking area of the country, it's not as easy to find. So I actually buy wyżwiankas in Alberta and bring them for members from other parties, from other provinces, so that they also can have a wyżwianka to wear in the House of Commons on that important day.
Йдемо далі. Історія про український соняшник. Вона дійсно вражає. Це національна квітка, можна так сказати, так, власне, нас, українців. І ми знаємо, що у вас також особисто є історія, пов'язана з даною квіткою. Розкажіть, будь ласка, про неї більш детально, тому що вона надзвичайно важлива.
Well, yeah, so first of all, I love sunflowers. They're beautiful. But it was actually the story of the old woman who was giving the sunflower seeds to the Russian soldiers to put in their pockets so that something good would grow. For me, that story was so moving. And so I thought it was springtime, and I thought, I'm going to plant sunflowers this year. And I'm going to think about Ukraine, and I'm going to celebrate Ukraine with the sunflowers. And I'm going to plant them again this year too. They're beautiful, and they're strong, and they're powerful, and they remind me of Ukraine.
На вашу думку, яким чином світ наразі бореться проти рашизму?
How should we fight the world racism? I mean, when we look at what's happening in Ukraine, and we look at the world that, for the most part, is very, very supportive of the war in Ukraine, I think those are conversations that, like, that's a role that Canada can play. That's an important role that Canada can play. We can have conversations with those countries that are not on board yet. We can explain why it's so important to support Ukraine. It's so important to support Ukraine during this war. You know, we have tricky conversations with countries all the time. They have to happen. But you look at countries where, for example, grain is they're not able to eat, and they're beholden to Russia for grain and whatnot. You see the challenges that those leaders would face. On the other hand, I think it's very important to connect the dots for them, to make it very, very clear that the reason this is in place is because Vladimir Putin decided to weaponize food. He decided to weaponize fuel. He decided to invade a sovereign country and start a war. This was not something that was done, you know, this is not the fault in any way of Ukraine. This is not the fault of NATO. This is the fault of Vladimir Putin and him invading a sovereign nation.
Yes. Продовжуючи тему про Володимира Путіна, вас було внесено до чорного списку Росії, на що вам було вручено медаль. Розкажіть про вашу реакцію, власне, коли ви дізналися, що ви персона нон грата в Росії.
That was a great day. When I was added to the list, I'm very, very proud. It did take some time. I suspect that I was actually in Poland when the first list came out, and I wasn't on that first list, and I was very upset not to be on the list, because of course it was my motion that declared it was a genocide, and I had done so much work on this. So I was very, very happy when they finally put me on the list. And of course, when they gave me the medal, it was when I was protesting outside of the Russian embassy in Ottawa. So I was standing with Ukrainians protesting against the Russian embassy, still having people here. And for me, it was a great place to be given the medal. And yeah, it's again something that it's a little bit funny because it's too big of a medal to wear, but I'm quite proud to be on that list.
Яким би ви одним словом описали українців? Які вони? Але одне слово.
Heroic. It has to be heroic. I think that would be the word everybody would use right now. Like I said before, we are watching a country defend democracy, defend international law, defend the right of sovereign nations to exist, and they're fighting for all of us. I mean, I can't say that enough. I recognize that the Ukrainian soldiers, the Ukrainian army, is not just fighting for Ukraine. They are fighting for all of us, and there can be no other word but heroic.
Thank you. Thank you. Як ви оцінюєте наразі ситуацію на сьогоднішній день, яка відбувається в Україні? Так? Тому що говорили, власне, що 3 дні і Київ наш, рік пройшов, за Україну воюють.
I'm so happy that, of course, that Russia has been stopped and that they have been pushed back. But this war needs to end. It needs to be over because there are children who are not going to school. There are people who are losing their lives every single day. There are so many Ukrainians who have left Ukraine to keep their families safe that want to go home. So as wonderful it is that Ukraine has been able to push Russia back and has been able to hold the line, has been able to be so successful in this the war needs to end. And the only way that it can end is with a Ukrainian victory. So all of the countries around the world need to support Ukraine and need to support Ukraine now, because the sooner that that happens, the sooner this war can be over, the sooner that children can go back to school, the sooner that people can start rebuilding their lives in Ukraine. So for me, people talk about the need for peace. The fastest way for us to get to peace, the fastest way we can stop the bloodshed is to ensure that Ukraine is able to win.
Останнє моє питання, які будуть ваші особисто дії, коли Україна переможе? А переможе вона вже доволі швидко, я переконана.
You know what I should probably do is I should get myself a bottle of champagne or something that I can celebrate with, because I will definitely need to celebrate. I think our whole parliament will need to have a celebration. And what I would like more than anything is to be able to go back to Ukraine and to see Ukraine as a free country that is no longer at war. That will just make my heart so happy.
Дякую вам. Дякую за те, що підтримуєте Україну, за те, що підтримуєте українців. Я переконана, що зовсім скоро ми з вами будемо разом святкувати перемогу. Дякую.
Yes, let's do that.